So this can all seem very abstract and academic and of no use to anyone.
Right.
And what I argue in my book is that admitting that free will is an illusion actually does have some important consequences. They're not the kind of consequences that people worry about. It's not that you have no basis to be a better person or to change your life or to make efforts to improve yourself. That all remains intact. But it does change our ethical views of good and evil in some important ways. And so we can maybe table that for the moment, or maybe we'll get to it. But
well, man, that's your opinion and you're entitled to it. But for someone that promotes science, I must say you're doing a piss poor job of it here. Oh, hi there. Yeah, it's me, the dude, aka Tom Clark here at Unfurled TV. Hello. So, I try to mind my own business, have a cup of Irish coffee in the afternoon, or in the case when it's morning, in the morning. And this killjoy here keeps showing up in my YouTube feed. And everything that I see, I don't see everything of his, but everything that I see from him that comes out of his self-appointed moral arbiter's mouth, it's killing my buzz, if you know what I mean. This guy, the nerve of him. So I've had enough of this in my YouTube feed, and yeah, it's Saturday, it's bowling night, and I'd rather be bowling, but I've got to set the record here. The dude must correct.
Actually does have some important consequences. They're not the kind of consequences that people worry about. It's not that you have no basis to be a better person or to change your life or to make efforts to improve yourself.
So you're sure about that, are you? How sure are you? What scientific basis do you have that if we adopted this concept that we don't have free will, that will have a negative moral impact, that people will be less motivated? Now, you may logically say that they shouldn't be based on your arguments, but what proof that you have that irrational people, which we all are to some degree, will not suffer from a lack of belief in free will? What is your evidence, sir? Oh, by the way, this video is from Joe Rogan Experience number 543. Sam Harris is the guest. It's on the Powerful JRE YouTube channel. It's a long video, and this topic starts at 2 hours and 3 minutes and 56 seconds at that mark. And look, I'm not saying that Sam Harris isn't smart. I really don't know much about this guy, and nor do I care to, because like I say, every time I see him in my feed, he's coming up to conclusions that are unfounded, that have no scientific basis for, that they are just his opinion, and then he tries to pawn his opinion off as if it's scientific fact because he is a scientist. These things do not follow from each other. These are non sequiturs. Just because you're a scientist doesn't mean that everything you say is based on science. It's just not true. And also, it's not my mission to know everything about every argument, about everybody on the internet, no matter how famous or beloved they may be. I'm not into that. I don't want to argue with everybody, but this guy, I've come across his stuff about a dozen times, and I don't understand why people listen to him, frankly. I guess there was he had some kind of history of arguing with theists, and so therefore atheists love him because he had these really, really powerful arguments that tears apart whether or not the Bible is literally true, or that you must believe in Jesus to be saved, and those kind of moral ponderings, very powerful stuff. I understand that, but that's I don't know what to say. I'm not a religious guy myself. I'm agnostic. I don't purport to know one way or the other, and I like to give atheists if they don't want to leave open the possibility of more powerful beings than themselves, that's fine. They can do that. If Christians want to believe that they know that God looks like a man and that Jesus was his actual son, and that, if they want to believe that's fine. But I'm agnostic. I would love to believe, but I just can't be convinced that there is a God. I'm closer to a deist than a Christian, if anything. But anyway, I don't really have an axe in this fight, other than I'm tired of this guy that's supposedly a scientist showing up in my feed, giving me opinion as though it's scientific fact, and I'm sick of it. Okay, anyway, and that's why I don't understand. If you are science-minded, if you think that you're science-minded, why do you listen to this guy? I mean, doesn't he seem to be full of himself, that he's always right because he's smart, because he's a scientist? I don't know, but he keeps showing up in my feed, and I guess because of the topics that I'm interested in, these are ones that he also chimes in, that he gets in my feed. But man, his stuff, it's weak. It's pretty weak. It's unconvincing sauce, if you ask me. But not all of it, but a lot of it, so much of it. Like I say, basically he has this habit of presenting theory as fact, as he does here. He's bound and determined to prove that free will doesn't exist, convince us of that, and he's trying to marshal some science to back him up on that, but it's all hogwash. I mean, look, there's a propensity, as he demonstrates here, for him to make awful conclusions based on very minute, very limited data, make grand claims on very limited, very minute data. And also, to be fair, not only do I not pay attention to this guy, I haven't even watched this whole thing, and I will in editing and stuff like that, and I will on this topic, but I want to make I don't want to make you guys suffer through the whole thing, so I'm trying to clip out my issues with the way he argues. If you want to see, his full argument, fully supported by everything that he had an opportunity to do, you can go to Joe Rogan's video, listen to the whole thing. Like I say, it starts at the 2 hour, 3-minute mark, something like that. You can also, I guess, buy his book. I'm not giving the guy a dime. I mean, if this is the kind of the idiocy that he tries to pawn off on people, I'm not having none of it. And I'm not saying he's stupid. I'm not. I'm saying that he pawns off idiocy. Okay, this is really stupid stuff here. It's very stupid. And now, of course, I haven't done all the research that I probably should before I make my opinion known. But hey, he never asked me if he could show up in my YouTube feed neither. So, I'm open to criticism here. I really haven't done my research, but I'm tired of him. I'm tired of getting this guy, this big Lebowski, if you will, into my feed. I just want to enjoy my YouTube, and this guy, he keeps getting in my feed. I can't take it anymore. Go away. I want him to go away.
Let's say I had written down on a piece of paper the next sentence you're going to speak.
Okay.
Right? So I had verbatim what's going to come out of your mouth now. And you start your side of the conversation, and I just hold up this pad, and you see that I have everything that is just now occurring to you to say. That would be pretty persuasive to you that you're not running a free will program over there.
Yeah, and when you can actually do that, go ahead and get back to me then, because you cannot do that, you dumb shit. You're basing your preaching, your assuredness that you are correct on something that you would need to be able to do, but that which you cannot do. And that doesn't strike you as faith in something which hasn't been shown to exist? Oh, come on.
It's when we perceive good and evil in the world, we look at people as agents who really are the authors of their actions. We relate to people like they have free will. And this seems to make ethical sense to us, and it seems to it's definitely the basis for our impulse for vengeance and retributive justice and the feeling that people really deserve to be punished. Bad people deserve what they get. And I'm not arguing that punishment is never valid. There may be a role for punishment that we want to retain in our justice system. But this idea of punishing people because they deserve it doesn't make a lot of sense.
And yet you'll see that Sam goes on acting and will continue to act here as if the main reason, the primary reason, the onus of our punishment is that we need retribution. That's factually incorrect. Look, you kind of admit it that we don't just punish people because they make bad choices and we want revenge. I mean, you kind of tip a hat to that. But there's many good reasons to punish someone's besides revenge, which you really don't bring into your analysis. How about behavior modification, deterrence, for one, not only for the one being punished, but as a warning to others to avoid, to avoid being society's asshat. So we put something before the criminal and potential criminal as an incentive to quit being society's asshole. That's an important aspect of it. It's not just a small piece of it. It's the most brilliant in your face piece of punishment. All right. It's not the third thing down the list. It's the first thing on the list. Okay. Deterrence. Maybe other countries it's revenge, but here it's deterrence. Now, it doesn't work all the time, but it works for some people. That slice of reasoning behind punishment acknowledges nature and nurture, and it puts in a new set of facts into the nurture and nature equation, if you will, in the hopes that people will get to this point where they make better decisions. Now, the idea that is punishment is 100% revenge and 0% rehabilitation and 0% protecting the law-abiding faction of society is farcical. Well, you're not making that argument, but you're proceeding as if though you can just ignore these other things and right out of the gate. You can't ignore these things right out of the gate and be taken seriously. Granted, again, you do hedge your bet a bit here to be fair, but Sam completely ignoring the rest of the ethical considerations, using terms like, well, let's table that for a moment. Okay, well, it would be nice if you come back to it, but I'm going to bet, I'll bet a right Russian that you never get back to this, okay? I think you like to table arguments, and it's kind of like the people electing a party to Congress, and they're expecting them to fulfill their campaign promises, and well, that gets tabled. Well, that's kind of what I think you mean by tabling things. Oh my goodness. Okay. But anyway, you have to put all of this on the table for your argument to even have a semblance of sense. And then when you bring all of this back off of the table, and none of what you're saying really has convincing. It's unconvincing when you take in all of the factors. Honestly, Sam, you think like a Sith. I mean, you only consider what you want to consider rather than the whole set of consequences for each of the myriad of choices before people. And Sam, you act like focusing on one aspect of the problem and ignoring all the other aspects of it is wisdom. That's not wisdom. That's useful in analyzing a situation, but you do have to bring it all back together. And like I said, I'm pretty confident, based on the way you are in other videos, that we're never going to get back. We're never going to get back to bringing all of these aspects on to the table. Well, let's see if you surprise me.
And what I'm arguing is that if we had a perfect understanding of the brain, if we could scan your brain at this moment and see every variable that influenced behavior as clearly and as compellingly as a golf ball sized brain tumor, right, we would see that your behavior and your thoughts and your innermost desires and your commitment to your diet and your love of jiu-jitsu and everything was just as determined as Charles Whitman's rages by a glioblastoma. And it all begins to look like a brain tumor. It's your responsibility and the fact that you're a mensch and you're a kind guy as opposed to a vindictive one. All of those variables, again, that you inherited courtesy of genes and environment, which are the only influences we think you have, right? And the truth is, even if you add a soul, you add an immortal Christian soul to the clockwork, you didn't create your soul. You can't take credit for the fact that you don't have the soul of a psychopath. So whatever you add is in some sense a gift. Brain tumors, souls, genes, cosmic ray bombardment, any influence and if we could understand these influences clearly, it would all begin to look like Charles Whitman's brain tumor. And if you add the rolling of dice, you add some randomness to it, that doesn't give you freedom. That just gives you randomness.
So a lot of good points going on there, but these aren't absolutes. In other words, the fact that there is some nature component to the decision that we make, there is some nurture component to the decisions that we make, even though that there is some randomness in our lives or just plain chaos theory randomness going on there, does not disprove free will. It doesn't even come close to disproving free will. So evidence of other factors being a part of why we do what we do, those obviously being showable, doesn't disprove free will at all. And not only are you trying to disprove free will, you want people to not believe that free will exists societal wide. You want the whole society to believe that. And you believe that if the whole society no longer believes in free will, that we will all become rational people and then willingly choose to be better people for it. It'll be a better ethical code somehow. Those things do not follow from each other at all. Even if there is no free will, which you can't prove, then all of your arguments are mute anyway, because what's going to happen is going to happen. But even if there wasn't no free will, all right, or even if it's very, very limited, I mean, free will is such a minute aspect of our decision making. That doesn't make the case that you go around telling everybody that free will doesn't exist is going to make life better for society. That from that kernel of so-called wisdom of yours, the entire ethos of jurisprudence will be improved. Therefore, no. That is not science. That's not even good thinking. That's just an idea that you pull out of your ass. That's all that is.
Okay, but we know that every decision has to be preceded by something, right? So and if you're going to take a scientific view of these things, we know it's preceded by neurophysiology.
Right. Can we measure consciousness, though? If there is a consciousness, if there's a something in the mind.
Right. So whether you think, what I'm arguing is that whether you think consciousness is arising out of the information processing of the brain, so it's what the mind is what the brain is doing, or you think consciousness is something else, and even something very spooky. Let's say it's ectoplasm. Let's say it's a Christian soul. Whatever it is, even in that case of dualism, you don't get free will. You just get some spookier causality that we can't describe, but it's still just coming out of the darkness from your point of view subjectively. You don't know what you're going to do next, and when you do it, you really don't know why you did it. And if you have a story about why you did it.
Okay, so there is some interesting stuff going on there, no doubt, but ultimately it's quite silly. I take a dump. I use TP with my right hand and I flush it down. I actually know why I do these things. And specifically, I use my right hand because that hand is more coordinated than my left. And I'm not going to entrust an important job like that to his less capable brother, the left hand, the moron brother, okay? Now, sure, I can't explain so much about why I'm right-handed or why I don't like the smell of my own poop, as apparently Sam likes the smell of his. But if I wanted to train my underachiever left hand to wipe my ass, I could do that. Whether I do that or not, if Sam wants to think he could, with the supercomputer that doesn't exist, predicted my training, whether or not I'm going to train my left hand in the next 5 seconds, if his computer could actually do that, and I guess he's free to speculate that stuff if he wants to, but it's not very convincing. In order for a scientist to be convinced by the science of it, this computer would have to be unbelievably accurate. I mean, we're talking like 99.99 something % accurate before a scientist would go so far as to say, free will doesn't exist. It's conclusive. A charlatan would say it if a computer could do it 50% of the time. But a real person that's thinking about all the facts is going to say, whoa, well, half the time the computer's getting it wrong. Can't we attribute that to free will? I mean, maybe it is free will, maybe it's not free will, but as long as that 50% remains unexplained, we cannot eliminate free will as a potential factor in the computer getting it wrong. Come on, that's how a scientist should think about these tests that you're talking about and the situation you're talking about with this guy with the tumor.
What I'm arguing is that this actually can become the basis for compassion and for a wiser justice system. And we have a justice system that's predicated on the notion of free will, and we've locked up 13-year-olds for their entire lives based on a sense that this evil little bastard really deserves what he gets.
Well, I think we've done that because we want to protect everyone else from this evil bastard. I think the idea is not whether or not this person is free to make these choices. It's whether or not they're a danger to society.
But the Supreme Court has actually said that our system is based on the notion of free will, and the determinism is hostile to any notion of retributive justice. So consciously, as a matter of jurisprudence, we think we are implementing a doctrine of free will.
First of all, Sam, you're full of shit. Joe, you are 100% right. Now, Sam, there is a grain of truth in what you're saying. The judicial system does, in large measure, take into account and operate under the philosophy that free will does exist, but it's not an absolute. It is not an absolute. Have you heard of the Twinkie defense? How about the insanity defense? How about the juvenile court system? Okay, we don't, the court system isn't perfect. And we don't follow we don't always use the tools in place to handle the situations that you're talking about. But there are these tools in place, and they are, when the court is satisfied, and whether they should be more satisfied more often that somebody is not in control of, that they have absolutely no control of themselves. They have no impulse control, and they're just loony bin. The idea of revenge punishment at that point is taken completely off the table. Then it comes completely a matter of protecting society and nothing else. And maybe even, well, I shouldn't say nothing else, because there is also a rehabilitation aspect. If we can get this guy back to his to having a mental capacity, his mental wits about him, we'll consider putting him back into society. I think didn't John Hinckley, the guy that tried to kill President Reagan, didn't he get released at some point? You are talking, oh my God, you Sam, go back and revisit our jurisprudence, the jurisprudence of the American system. I don't know, maybe you're from Canada, or I don't know, somewhere even weirder, but Sorry, Canadians, but you don't have free speech in Canada. And if you don't have free speech, that's weird. Okay. But anyway, look, come on. All right. Please go think about the legal system and what it does. Now, what you've done is you've cherry-picked some Supreme Court justice in some opinion talking about that we reject this idea that people don't have free will. Some defense lawyer come up with this kind of defense, and they tried to bring it out in a court, and the court says, no, our jurisprudence rejects that. And it does. It does reject the idea that that free will doesn't exist. They do recognize, though, that sometimes facts are such that the person isn't mentally capable of being held accountable. They call it culpability. He's not culpable for his actions. Okay. That does exist. It's recognized in our jurisprudence for I don't know how long this has been around. And you are seemingly ignorant of this. And yet you propose to put upon all of society this idea that there is no free will so that you can get the justice system changed because it doesn't take into the account these things that it does take into account. Based on zero science. I mean, literally, you have zero science. None. I challenge you on it. Where is your science on this? You have none. None. Zip.
And there's another way to see the problem here. Imagine we had a cure for psychopathy. Imagine we had a cure for evil. So we completely understand human evil at the level of the brain. Turns out, just by sheer luck, it's just you got one, there's one neurotransmitter
which
there.
Which is quite possible, right?
It's unlikely, but it's possible. And let's just say there's just one kind of
a drug or a shot that we give people.
It's just a pill. It's just a nutrient. You just put it in the food supply, right? And we cure evil. Now imagine. So now we have someone locked up. It's Uday Hussein, or it's this 13-year-old who's done these evil things, and we think, you know what? This guy was such an evil bastard. We're going to withhold the cure from him as just an extra punishment, right? And that wouldn't make any sense.
Of course it wouldn't make any sense. Imagine all these things that didn't exist and don't exist and have never happened and aren't going to happen. Imagine if all of that came true that isn't true, then that wouldn't make sense. Well, no shit, it doesn't make any sense. God. If all of that was true and we did something awful that we haven't done, well, that wouldn't make any sense. Right. Yes, that is true. It wouldn't make any sense. Seriously, I don't know why you continue to get into my feed. You need to go away, please. Look, if anything doesn't make any sense, it's your arguments. You need to stop this. And this is why, this is the onus, this is the kernel, this is why you need to present a moral code based upon the idea of there being no free will. Just on this whimsical acid trip, mental gollyvanting around, being able to predict someone, whether or not they're going to raise their right hand or their left hand, a computer hooked up to an MRI can figure that. Sam, go find some freaking science for this, or drop the science and just give us your opinion, just talk about it. Ask your questions of legal scholars, what do you think about this idea that I had about our jurisprudence system? And, ask a question and you would get told that, yeah, the judicial system has those things in place, but, maybe they're not in place as much as they should be or prominent as they should be. Yeah, but they do exist. You would know these things if you would just come at it from the side that what you're doing is trying to formulate an opinion. But you're not trying to formulate an opinion. You are trying to shove science down our throats that is not science. And you need to stop it. Just drop the pretenses, get real, be a normal human being, and talk like a normal human being about these issues. They are important issues.
There's something so clarifying about the Charles Whitman story. Once you hear about the brain tumor, you just think, oh man, all right, well, let's just, it turns out this was not evil. We're not talking about evil. We're talking about a brain tumor.
Right.
Okay. What I'm saying is the more we understand the human mind, the level of the brain, the more that feeling is going to encroach on all of these.
Sam, this is nothing more than an anecdote. Just because this fella had a brain tumor doesn't mean he didn't have any control. And even if he didn't have any control over him climbing up into the steeple and shooting the innocent people, it doesn't make it wise to dismantle all of society's way of disincentivizing bad behavior, including legal and, quite frankly, non-legal punishments. Those things do not follow from each other. I don't know what it is. Are you getting emotional about this story, about this guy that's, might have not been a wicked person, and you thought he was wicked when it was first in the news, and then come out to find out later he had this brain tumor, and you're like, wow, maybe he wasn't a wicked person. I don't know what's going on here. I suspect it has to do with something that you feel like religion has not given us a good moral code. You don't like Christianity. You don't like it for a variety of reasons, and some of those I can understand. A lot of them I don't understand. A lot of the things that you go on about aren't really irrelevant in my world, in my way of thinking. But anyway, you want to supplant religion with some kind of ethos that is non-religious and yet moral, and you're struggling to find a way to do that. And that you're just lashing out like a madman, trying to make a moral code out of a couple of anecdotes. If the people knew about this tumor in his brain, his defense attorney had known it, they would have argued this before the court. He would have been tested for this. I mean, if this would have happened, I live in bumfuck Idaho, okay? It's a small community here. If an attorney would have said, Judge, I think he's crazy. You don't do that in public, but you just have the court order a mental evaluation. You just ask court, hey, could we have a mental evaluation done for my client? And the state will pay for that. And then if you think like we think that he might have a brain problem, we'd like to have a medical examination. The state will pay for it if you can convince a judge. If not, you can pay for it yourself. And if they did have a tumor, then they would bring in psychologists and examine him and see if that tumor affected his brain that much. You act like this doesn't have this. There is no mechanism for this. There is absolutely a mechanism. And I don't know why you are lashing out like as if everything needs to be replaced because Sam Harris is the next the atheist Jesus, the Jesus of atheists. Okay, anything that we get out of society, any conclusions that come about, anything that's good out of society, it has to pass through Sam Harris's lips. Get over yourself, man. Try to examine what is in place first before you throw it out. You're mad. This is insane. You're thrashing about wildly. It's not healthy. It's not a good look. It really isn't.
I mean, the other reason why I'm so committed to this is
because you think you can devise a better system of morality and justice that has come down through our Judeo-Christian heritage and traditions. You know what? Why don't you show me how the teachings of Jesus, and I'm not talking the Old Testament here, just the words ascribed to Jesus. You show me, and I'm not talking about these James Jones types and these Scientologist types and these big church types that fleece their flocks, okay? But just you show me the words ascribed to Jesus. You show me from there how he wasn't arguing for forgiveness, for meekness, for compassion, just as you are here. I don't go to church. I don't study the Bible. I read the Bible, but I don't study it. But the dude was not a bad dude. If he's a myth, he's not a bad myth. Was he a perfect dude? Is he a perfect myth? I don't know. I don't care. He's a really good example to fashion yourself after. I mean, and in fact, you are following his example. You are following in his footsteps, almost step for bloody step. Honestly, to me, it looks like you are in a high school popularity contest with Jesus to see who can get people to act more loving towards each other. But, dude, Jesus has a 2,000-year head start on you. I mean, you're not introducing anything new here except you want to take Jesus out of the equation. But these are the things that he preached. And you're bringing in if, and imagine. And that you're bringing those elements into your argument, which is all speculation, is all spooky stuff, like you say. And you want to replace your kind of spookiness, unfactual, inconclusive information, your anecdotes. You want to replace those with what's in the Bible, with what's within the Christian scriptures. You want to replace Jesus. Well, I'm sorry, you and Jesus, whether you like it or not, you are morally on the same page. You are of one mind. At least here in this case, you both tell anecdotes to make your point. You both reach out to mysterious things, imagine about a new future. You don't have any hard science to prove up what you're proposing. You're doing the same goddamn thing. You don't want revenge justice? Congratulations. Neither did Jesus. You've just joined his position. A little bit late to the party, but nevertheless, I'm sure you're welcome. You're welcome to come. You know, I don't believe, not necessarily disbelieve, but I don't need to believe that Jesus was some supernatural being to realize, the information he had is good. It's like you're committing the logical fallacy of, I can't remember the name of it, but, basically poison in the well. Well, because the argument is coming from somebody that I'd like to smear all the time. I love smearing this guy, so anything that he says, I can't use, and no, society should never use anything that the guy said. That's all this appears to be. It appears that you hate Christianity so much, or you probably wouldn't use the word hate, but you just think it is so unredeemable. It has absolutely no value, that there's something much better beyond the horizon than what come out of Jesus of Nazareth's mouth, or what it was ascribed to come out of his mouth, that you are going nuts trying to supplant it. It's not looking good.
From my point of view, nothing important is lost here, and something ethical is gained. I mean, so for instance, the possibility of having compassion for even for evil people, loving your enemy, being like Jesus in that respect, which makes absolutely no sense until you actually see a basis for having compassion.
Oh my God, this is so great. If you don't want to believe in me, Sam Harris, and my goofy theory, that's okay, because, Jesus also said, even though he had no scientific, like I do, I have scientific basis, but he had no scientific basis to see that violence that begets violence. He never observed any bullshittery in the world, He would have had no opportunity back in the day to see bullshittery of people being shitty to each other and seeing that it was a shit-eating circle jerk. Unlike me, of course, who has all of these computers and documentation of tumors in people's head. He had no scientific reason to preach compassion and forgiveness, because he was incapable of seeing revenge and violence and peace and love and make a judgment call all to that as to how a better way to live one's life, how a society could be better, because he had no scientific basis. Even though he wasn't a scientist, even that that dummy came to the same conclusion that I, the admirable Sam Harris, have reached. In other words, even if you're dumb, Mr. Rogan, you could choose to be nice if you wanted to. You could look up to Jesus. I mean, you're not giving up anything if you do what I say, even if you're stupid. But you might have to understand, sir, Mr. Rogan, there's no free will. I have scientific evidence that I'm not going to show you to prove that. So you don't make choices, even though we have choices before us. You don't make those choices. I mean, even though, hey, choose my way. I've got a choice here. Choose my way. I'm trying to convince you, aren't I? Choose my way of thinking. He who has no free will, please choose. Please, please, please choose. Choose to believe me. I know you can't choose. Circumstances have already predetermined your choice here, but please choose to believe me. If you don't, I can't stop with my tirade of nonsense because I too have no choice. I was predetermined to be this annoying. The fact that I have to continue to try to convince you for exactly 45 minutes to the second that I'm going to go 45 minutes trying to convince you to the second. That's been predetermined. I couldn't even stop if I wanted to. Couldn't even stop. I have no free will. Oh, God. This is... I guess I get a laugh out of it, but I would just prefer this guy not be in my feed.
And the spooky stuff that people want to introduce doesn't actually amp up the profundity. It makes it less profound.
Well, it actually makes us more responsible for engineering a healthy society because we have to be aware of all the variables that are involved in every single human being's developmental process. And the more we can mitigate the negative ones, the better we can make our society. And that doesn't really discount the idea of people being responsible for their actions or punishing people or removing people.
Not at all.
Not at all.
Exactly.
I see what you're saying.
Because punishment has its effects, but now we're free to see that we just want the punishments that have the effects we want. We can get rid of retribution and vengeance.
Sam, Joe, great message. This is a good message. I don't 100% agree with you on there being no retribution at all whatsoever necessarily, but let me say this. Deterrence and safety should be way more important to us, non-Christians and Christians alike, to try to be Christ-like in this, to be honest with you, where there isn't revenge in our hearts. If we're going to administer punishment, it's going to be for the good of the person that's being punished and the good of society that's being punished, or that he's being punished, okay? I'm happy to have you trying to reach non-Christians with this message, but Christians have been reaching to each other with this message. It's a tenet, a core tenet of Christianity. Okay. And I'm happy to have learned it through Christians. I don't care the source. I learned this through Christian friends of mine that brought this to me, made me open my eyes. Okay. If you can open somebody else's eyes that just can't listen to a Christian because they are a bigot and they are prejudiced, so be it. Because this message, I do think, needs to get out there, but it's already out there. It's already a very integral part of the justice system. In fact, the justice system has more of this in its heart than the general public. In fact, the general public is the kind of the mob that, and the legislators that go after these mandatory sentences and these, lock them up, throw away the key forever and ever. Sure, you have some judges, Judge Roy Bean and people that want to be like him. They're just like, they're sadists. Really, I mean, they do exist. I'm not saying that they don't. But my experience has been that the justice system is really not trying to punish them for just because the people are evil. They want to get them off the streets. It's kind of a last resort to getting people off the streets. If there's a mandatory guideline, they have to do that. And that's a function of the legislatures, and the legislatures react to the mob mentality. And so if we can get out there and get the mob mentality, if we can overcome that, that would be great. I'm not saying that there shouldn't be any revenge or retribution kind of component to it, but it should be it should be the very last consideration. That I agree with 100%. But this isn't science that you're dealing with here. You really need to see what Jordan Peterson sees in religion. If you're going to wield science on this, go to where the science is. It's not in this neuroscience. It's not in an MRI, dude. It's in sociological studies and, trying to control it as best you can for populations and looking at their justice system and the different components of it and see what comes out of that, or test cases that have been administered in certain states that, have really tried to take the retribution, the revenge out of the judicial system. It's a cornerstone of our justice system that it's not about personal revenge. It's about society taking it out of the hands of one eye for an eye kind of a situation. And it's that Christian moral code, that overcoming the Old Testament moral code, is really what we have today. And it's not perfect, but all of the elements that you're talking about are there. And what you really would like to see is the priority shifted even more so, which, quite frankly, I support you in that. There is no answer here, as far as I can tell, about free will versus absolutely no free will. I mean, if you ever get the science for that, then you have the science for that, but you don't have the science for it. So what you want is a hierarchy of values, as Jordan Peterson would put it. And like I say, you need to go where the science is for that. And this garbage that you're trying to pawn off on us here, it's just sophistry. It's without merit. It has no foundation. It's a thought among a train of loony, inconsistent anecdotes whereby you purport to use cherry-picked exceptions to prove your unproven rules and theories. And the only time you make sense is when you agree with what Jesus and the judicial system has already agreed to. You're just talking about a balancing that you may not agree with the current court system, but that's the only difference that you have. But yeah, 100% I support you. Please continue to argue for a justice system that would be acceptable to Jesus, because the dude, in large part, was right about that, in my opinion. And you're right to side with him. Now, the part where I have a problem about there being no retribution element to it, it's not so much retribution, but I don't see a lot of people seeing the healing power in the justice system. It's there, but it's not argued enough. There's been much too little argument as to atonement, redemption, how suffering helps atonement, how suffering helps redemption, how restitution also helps those things. I mean, it's talked about, but it's not talked about enough. And those are important components to changing the way people think and thereafter act badly. So I've represented hundreds, maybe into 1,000, possibly into a couple thousand of criminal defendants. But at the very least, hundreds of people that were accused of committing crimes, and I've come to understand a few things, with that experience. There is a value to the individual in the relief of getting caught, being punished, and serving one's time and doing one's restitution. So if you do something wrong and you just get away with it, a certain type of person that will haunt. Another type of person, it'll just make them worse. But for some people, it really helps the people that deserve the help the most, the people that are your best people that get pulled into the criminal system. The people are helped. Their consciences are eased by making them do their time, by serving their punishment. And, that doesn't get talked about enough, I think. Anyway, it's a blessing for them like I say, for having been caught, brought to justice, and to answer to provide restitution and answer for their bad behavior, atone, as it were. Psychologically speaking, that is good for them.
And we can just think, okay, what kind of world do we want to live in? And so maybe punishing people in certain ways can be justified totally on pragmatic lines because it has a certain effect. It deters certain crimes. It makes them better people, whatever those punishments are. Let's say they exist. Then you don't need a retributive story. You just have a story of, we want fewer carjackings, and we want the carjackers to be better people. So we're going to do X, Y, and Z, and deter carjacking on the one hand, and rehabilitate carjackers on the other.
Okay, well, that's a really good spot to end on. Look, my argument isn't that you are completely off the rails here as to your conclusions, but how you got here is not scientific whatsoever. And you could have easily gotten here by just, listening to what Jesus said and accepting that, these are wise words. The guy was looking at what was going on in his time as far as legal and non-legal punishments, and he had some wisdom to impart, and just accept it. Or if you don't want to take it from Jesus, from somebody else. I mean, hundreds and thousands of people have made this argument, and you trying to tie in science that doesn't fit into this is not helpful. There is science for this. I'm sure of it. There's studies that are done, arguments that have been made by people that want to influence the judicial system for this stuff. And, quite frankly, I haven't really delved into it that much, but I've seen defense attorneys, talking to judges about these papers that come out and these studies that have been done, and what's going on there. Well, it doesn't have to do with the case that is before the judge, but they're just sitting and gossiping, and they're trying to influence, trying to shape the judge thinking, make him aware that revenge is a poor reason to punish somebody. Okay? And I don't think most other judges need that much convincing. It's a good reminder, though, because, I have seen judges go like, I'm so mad because this guy is such a creep. And, a judge is a human being. And if somebody's being a real piece of work, right? The judge can, get in there. I'm going to punish him because this guy's evil, because he's bad, and it can't happen. And justice system is ran by humans, and until it's not ran by humans, that kind of stuff is going to happen. And we do what we can to lower those passions as much as the defense attorneys can. And maybe there's some prosecutors that are too, we must punish the wicked. I'm an Old Testament prosecutor, or I'm a feminist prosecutor, and all men are evil. And, that people like that exist. I'm saying that we should be out there talking to people saying, hey, if this is how your prosecutor's office is running, you need to realize that that's not very scientific, and you should have, Sam, actual science that backs you up on this, not this pie in the sky stuff that you're talking about, all of this spooky stuff that you can't prove. You should have science for that when you bring up this argument, if that's your bailiwick. I'm quite happy to follow in the footsteps of Jesus and say, hey, judge, hey, people, hey, prosecutor, are we in here for revenge's sake, for spite's sake? Quote some Milton at them. These arguments are already being made. I welcome you to join the fray, but I wish, if you're going to bring science, dig up some real science on it. That's all I'm saying. And until you quit acting like you are the person that is so wise and so smart, and you have 3 or 4 friends that you're so much smarter than all the Christians and all the traditions and all of the fine-tuning we've done in regards to trying to follow the compassionate, the meek, the forgiving example of Christ through hundreds and hundreds of years, until you get off of your high horse and realize that, Jesus wasn't all bad and Christianity wasn't all bad, and they've delivered into your lap the exact system, almost the exact system that you're arguing for, then get out of my feed. I don't need your nonsense.